Happy Wellness Wednesday. I am here with Shannon Hammond, and though we have not met in person, I'm thrilled to welcome her. We've had a couple conversations and she comes highly recommended. So welcome, Shannon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so excited. So you are highly recommended by Deb Hanna. And so hopefully Deb is here watching us. For anybody who has questions tonight, we are taking questions. So I'm going to be checking my phone, hopefully better than usual, for any questions that might be rolling in. So let's see who's here. Oh, yes, Deb is here. Yay, you made it. Okay.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, Deb. Perfect. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So I want to introduce Shannon, just give a little background on her. Shannon is a founding member and current president of Yes, Inc., which is a nonprofit. We're going to talk more about it, for supporting those with young-onset dementia and education and support. So we will, again, get to that. Shannon has dedicated her legal career, she's an attorney, exclusively to the practice of Medicaid and estate planning. She's a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, the Coalition of Geriatric Services, the Senior Provider Information Network, and the Elder Law and Estates and Trust sections of the Maryland State Bar Association. She was named a Maryland Super Lawyer Rising Star in the field of elder law in 2013 to 2015, 2019, and 2020. Congratulations, as published by Baltimore Magazine. Shannon is a frequent lecturer on legal issues involving Medicaid, estate planning, and probate. She has taught strategic planning for aging and asset protection at the College of Notre Dame of Maryland Renaissance Institute and legal issues and the elderly at the Johns Hopkins University Odyssey program. Shannon previously served on the board of directors for the Maryland nonprofit organization By Their Side, which advocates for developmentally disabled Marylanders and their families. And my dog just exited from the building and is now wanting to get to exit. You go, K-Puppy, can you get the door on your own? He's a frequent flyer on our Wellness Wednesdays. He jumps in and out of the chair regularly. So welcome, Shannon. So beyond, the bio, share a little bit about you beyond that. Who is Shannon? What motivates you? What was your journey to become an attorney?
Sure. Well, certainly being an attorney and being involved in Yes and some of these other organizations take up a large majority of my time, at least during the week. My second full-time job is as a mom. I have two kids. Jacob is 13 and Abigail is 9. So they keep us very busy both during the week and running around to soccer fields and gymnastics on the weekends. I am the oldest of 5. I have 4 younger brothers. And that kind of became an integral part of my journey through dementia and caregiving for my mom, which hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that because that's really influenced a lot of, I guess, where my career and my extracurricular involvement has taken me over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And I'm married. My husband, Scott, is also an attorney. He's a prosecutor in Howard County. And that's about it.
Yeah. So did you know from by the time you were 5 years old that you wanted to be an attorney, or how did
I did. I was that kid. I remember in kindergarten raising my hand and saying I wanted to be a lawyer. I don't even think I knew what a lawyer was. I have a lot of lawyers in my family. There are a lot of lawyers on my husband's side of the family. I don't know if it's in the DNA. Where lawyers are just really persuasive and they kind of plant that seed in your brain at a young age. But, once I got that idea, I just followed course all the way through. And, I think for me, that was a good thing because it really helped to shape a lot of the decisions that I made even early on, even as early as middle school, when you can take your first elective courses. I remember thinking that mattered. I need to be strategic about what I'm choosing here because this course, even though that's not going to affect law school or being a lawyer, that could affect my eligibility for the next class or the next class. So I kind of started to chart that course pretty early on. And then followed it all the way through. It didn't go exactly as I planned. I did go straight from high school to college to law school. I took a lot of Spanish classes. That was one of the classes I started in middle school. I wasn't great at it right out of the gate, but I just felt like Spanish was going to be an important skill and I wanted to learn it. My mom was trying to persuade me to take French, and I thought, when in the world am I going to use French? But I could definitely see a need for knowing Spanish. So I started taking it in 7th grade. I just kept taking it all the way through. And by the time I graduated high school, I had 15 credits towards Spanish in college. So I thought, well, I guess I'm taking Spanish in college. And then I had this idea that I was going to have this double major in Spanish and business, and that was going to really set me up for law school. I think I suffered through the first 4 business classes before I got to economics, and I thought, this is for the birds, or at least it's not for me. Which is funny because I deal so much with numbers now, but just economics was like a whole nother language for me. So I dropped my business major. I ended up with a degree in Spanish. And fortunately now, having gone through law school, I realized that there's nothing that will prepare you for it. So it doesn't really matter what your degree is in. But there I was again thinking, okay, well, now I have a degree in Spanish. And so now here I am in law school, so I can blend those two things by going into immigration. So my plan was to do immigration law. And then kind of the same thing happened in law school. I took a trust and estates course. And your first year of law school is brutal. I mean, you come in thinking that you're at least kind of smart, kind of qualified to be there. And then you're just very quickly brought back to reality that you're not as smart as you think you are. So by the time you get to choose a class and you actually get a good grade in it in your second year, it's like this huge confidence boost. And so I took a trust and estates course and I did well in it. So I took the next one and the next one and the next one. And, I developed a genuine interest in that topic or in that field. And I had a great professor who really guided me and helped to encourage me in that direction. So as soon as I graduated, I went right into working in an estates and trust department in a law firm down in Prince George's County. And I loved it. There I was doing exactly what I had planned to do over the course of law school. And then my son was born, and that kind of pulled me back a little bit closer to home. I didn't have any connection to the DC metro area other than that job. And also towards the end of that time, I was there for a little over 3 years. More and more of my clients would ask me kind of on the way out the door, oh, by the way, my mom's in the nursing home. So what should I be doing to try to protect her house? Or is there anything we need to be doing with her money? And I thought, gosh, I have no idea, but I'll find out. And so the attorneys that I worked with at the time were interested in me finding out and kind of developing this area of practice. So I went to a couple classes to try to figure it out. And the only thing that really taught me is you can't figure it out from a couple classes. Mm-hmm. So it's just a highly technical area, and it's something you either do all the time or most people don't touch it. So I just felt pulled in that direction. And I was very fortunate to land at one of the preeminent elder law firms in Maryland. I had great mentors and worked with really great attorneys, and that just further cultivated my love for working with this population. And then I started Hammond Law just because I got tired of driving to Baltimore every day. My decisions seemed to be commute-based a lot of times, but on the map it didn't look that bad, but in rush hour traffic it got tiresome. So I decided I would start a small practice right here on Main Street in Sykesville. And so this coming February will be 9 years that I've been on my own. And it's great. I really enjoy it. I love having control over it. I love practicing law the way that I want to practice, interacting with my clients the way that I want to, and not being forced into a mold of how somebody else does their job. And I have flexibility with my kids, which is really invaluable right now.
Right. Awesome. Sounds like you kind of came into the perfect happy place where from childhood, you went all the way up. You
all went to this point.
Achieved your goal, and now you have your own business, and that's fantastic. That's a good story.
Yeah.
So I've only personally become familiar with elder law. I went to a conference with a neurologist an elder law attorney in New York called Saving Your Marbles. So he did a dementia prevention piece, and she did how to plan. If your parent already has dementia, what can you do? We were dealing with that with my husband's mom. My mom has already passed away from dementia, so this is also close to home. And we just went through an elder law attorney to kind of protect the assets for my husband's parents. So can you explain what the difference is between estate planning and elder law?
Sure.
Are they different?
You might get different answers from different people on this question, but I'll tell you how I see those two fitting together. I think of estate planning, maybe even just planning in general, as the umbrella. And then you can have high-end estate planning, you know, people that have taxable estates that are over the estate tax limits in Maryland or the federal limits. That becomes rarer and rarer because the limits are so high. But that would be one type of planning. You know, I think that like guardianship work, disability work would fall under the planning umbrella. Elder law, to me, it also has a lot to do with basic estate planning. So, you know, a lot of the strategies that I use with my clients are derived from the powers in basic estate planning documents, like a power of attorney, for example. So it's about understanding the Medicaid rules. Not every elder law case is a Medicaid case. So I think just because you practice elder law doesn't mean that every client that comes in the door needs to apply for Medicaid. So you kind of have to understand and learn the continuum of decisions that need to be made prior to when somebody goes into a nursing home and needs to spend down and qualify for Medicaid. And so there's a lot of opportunity to plan and strategize in those years leading up to actual long-term care placement, which in reality is the worst case scenario. Nobody really wants that. But for one reason or another, it's sometimes necessary. So I think of elder law as understanding all of those nuances and planning opportunities throughout different stages of aging, levels of care that somebody might require. Because decisions that you're making, you know, 6 years prior or 5 years or even 3 years prior can have impacts on your potential eligibility for other benefits. So you need to be aware of all those rules, and that helps to guide the decision-making process and the advice that I give my clients. And I also think that elder law has the benefit of estate planning kind of looks prospectively. So these are the documents that I think you're going to need based on what you're telling me today. Elder law also has a lot to do with implementing those documents later on. So even though it might be the same family that I drafted for 10 years ago, and now they're coming back to me because they're in a situation where somebody was discharged to rehab and now they're going to be in long-term care, now here I'm turning back and implementing those same documents that I drafted 10 years ago and looking at the power of attorney and, you know, understanding what powers the family has to be able to strategize and plan and protect assets at that time. So it's kind of that circumspect, I guess. We're working on the back end, not just the prospective planning in estate planning work, but really the implementation and helping clients to, you know, use the documents on the backside.
Okay. I saw someone describe it as estate planning being documents that you use after you're dead, and elder law being the documents that you use while you're alive. Would you describe
That's
it
interesting.
like
I can see where they're going with that. That might be a good way to simplify it. I mean, I don't want people to think that estate planning only means having a will or only means having a trust and talking about who gets your stuff when you die. Estate planning among attorneys means your power of attorney, your medical directive, your will, maybe a trust, depending on your circumstances. So it's really all of those core documents that make up an estate plan. So maybe it's a bit of a misnomer to call it an estate plan because it does imply that it really only happens after you die. But I do understand the elder law is the lifetime piece. So what do we do with those documents while you're alive? I think that part is accurate.
Okay. Yeah. So our elder law attorney, I'll just mention that we had to get an elder law attorney who's in New Jersey because laws are different state to state. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes, it is.
So, we found someone who was recommended, and I'm thinking she was on the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. And that is one of your affiliations as well.
Yes.
That's how we found her. She was close and had been recommended. So we did the power of attorney. We did the living will, the advance directives. But then we also planned for, okay, what if mom dies first? What if dad dies first? What are we going to do with the house, with the bank accounts? What's the plan?
Yeah.
And nobody wants to talk about their dying. It was really hard to kind of broach the conversation. But I think what finally pushed it, to signatures was, she had a fall, she went into rehab. And, we're seeing she's going to need more help. Are we going to have help in the home? Is she going to go to long-term care? We have to plan financially. We have to have a plan.
Yeah.
So, do you help people have a plan?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A couple things. I'm jotting down notes based on the story that you just told, because there are 3 things I wanted to mention. Talking about, you never know who's going to go first. Your mom goes, dad goes. That's the crystal ball. I mean, that's the variable that we just don't know. And to tie that into the sensitive nature of these discussions, part of my entire objective and how I practice law, how I run my office and my firm, is to make it as comfortable and relaxed as possible. I don't want people to feel like they're walking into a stuffy law firm to talk about the end of their lives, even though that's what we're talking about. Yeah. I try to just keep it really objective and say, and sometimes there are very real imminent topics, whether somebody has a recent diagnosis, or somebody is really in the end stages of their life, when clearly you're there to plan for that person. But I just remind everyone in the room, I could die tomorrow. We have no idea. So the only difference between this person who is coming into the office with this diagnosis and anybody else in the room is that this person has a better idea of what's coming and we don't. So these issues affect everybody. They can certainly be more imminent for somebody that has a diagnosis of dementia or cancer or whatever it might be. But they're issues that affect absolutely everybody. So I try to just break the ice that way, and also remind people that, as uncomfortable as it might be to have these conversations, these are decisions that will be made at some point in time. The question today is, do you want to participate in making the decision for yourself? Or do you want to kick the can down the road and let your family try to guess what you would have wanted them to do later on? And so, of course, everybody wants to have a say in their decisions. So, just try to keep it moving forward and just gather some basic information and not make it feel too heavy, and then go from there. So the plan has to be flexible because, like you said, we don't know who's going to die first, even though we might be planning for one person primarily. There are always secondary issues or, contingent plans that we have to consider. So, going back to this idea of the power of attorney, I harp on it all the time. I think it's the most important estate planning document you can have. I always tell my clients it's the most expensive document not to have. Because if nobody has the ability to sell your house or deal with your retirement or life insurance, all of those things require authority to be able to manage those assets for you. So without that document, then you're left having to go to court and file for guardianship and get all these attorneys involved. It's much more expensive, and all of these reasons to avoid it. So the power of attorney is what keeps the plan flexible. So it's not that somebody comes in and says, okay, I'm concerned about long-term care. I'm concerned about the costs. Will I lose my house? How do we protect my money? I'm not necessarily the person that's going to say, you need to take all your money and lock it up in an irrevocable trust and hope we make it past the next 5 years. It's not that that's a wrong approach. It's just not my lane, I guess, in the world of elder law. I'm what people would probably consider a crisis planner. I like to think of it as though you keep control and flexibility over your money and your assets until the need actually arises. And then we work within, all of the toolbox of strategies to implement whatever the best plan is at that time.
Okay, so you mentioned the 5 years. So I'm familiar with this, but maybe people out there listening are not. There's lots of rules and regulations. An occupational therapist and working in rehab, I know that somebody has to be in the hospital admitted for 3 days before they can go to rehab, and insurance will pay for it. If they're on observation for 2 of those days, it
doesn't count.
Doesn't work. And so another person on your board, Jill Rosner, she's sometimes been someone I called.
Yeah.
She will go in there and advocate for
she's
people,
an advocate.
get them off of observation, admit them so they can get their 3 days in. So so they don't have thousands of dollars of medical bills and rehab to be covered. And then there's, the rule that Medicare will pay for 100 days. And so this is another
days.
What's that?
I said, but you never really get your 100 days.
You never really get your 100 days. So there's lots of these rules that probably the general population doesn't know. So you mentioned 5 years, and this was something that with our elder law attorney in New Jersey, we first started talking about putting everything in a trust, and we were thinking they're in good shape. We could go 5 years. And then it was clear. I think that is really taking a big risk. I don't think we're going to last 5 years. So let's talk about the 5-year rule.
Okay. So in the world of Medicaid, and you mentioned this earlier, that the laws vary from state to state. So that's really important to remember. Okay. The 5-year rule applies everywhere because Medicaid is a jointly funded federal and state program. So half of the money comes from not half, but a portion comes from the government, a portion comes from the state. So each state is allowed to implement their program with laws that can be more restrictive than the federal parameters, but they can't be less restrictive. So that's where you get these nuances in the rules from state to state. But the 5-year look back applies in every state because that's part of the federal rules in the Medicaid program. And what that means is from the date you apply for benefits, Medicaid will look back over the last 5 years prior to your requested eligibility date, and they are scrutinizing those transactions, everything that's happened within the last 5 years, money coming in, money going out. It's the opposite of the criminal justice system. In Medicaid, you are presumed guilty until you prove yourself innocent. So when there's large sums of money being moved around, the burden is on the applicant to prove that those transfers or withdrawals or checks were not made for the purpose of establishing Medicaid eligibility. So basically that's the presumption, is whatever you did in the 5 years leading up to the date that you applied for Medicaid, you must have been hiding your money. So you have to prove to us that you weren't hiding your money in order to avoid a penalty. So that's really what the 5-year look back is all about. And so part of our job in preparing Medicaid applications is doing that forensic review. Before we just blindly file 5 years worth of bank statements with the caseworker and hope we get a favorable determination, we review every transaction on every statement, track all of that money. It really is forensic accounting so that we can verify everything before it leaves our office. We know the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And that way, if there is a problem transaction, we have an opportunity to address it and maybe solve it before the application leaves our office, instead of being on our heels when we get a request for information from a caseworker on a transaction that we were not aware of. So that's what the 5-year look back is about. People don't live their lives in fear of Medicaid, and they shouldn't. And the reason I say that is because there's a list of exceptions to the penalty rules. These aren't strategies. These are exceptions. So in other words, gifts or transfers of assets that normal people have in the last 5 years, if you fall under one of those exceptions, then you will avoid a penalty. So for example, birthday gifts, holiday gifts, helping pay for your children to go to college, If you have a child that has a financial hardship and you help them pay their bills, or medical expenses for a child, there's all sorts of exceptions, common reasons that people would give money to other family members, charitable donations. So Medicaid in Maryland recognizes this list of exceptions. So that's why I say, just because there's a 5-year look back, it doesn't mean you need to hurry up and call your local elder law attorney and make sure that you're fully versed on the rules so that you can avoid any potential problem. As long as you're not giving your money away to hide it, then most of those typical transactions can be resolved and addressed before the application is filed, so you don't actually get a penalty for those transactions.
Okay. I'm going to ask a really basic question that people might not know.
Sure.
What's the difference between Medicare and Medicaid?
Oh, that's a good question. So Medicare is an entitlement program. In other words, you automatically become eligible for Medicare primarily when you turn 65 and under other certain circumstances related to disability at a younger age. But usually you turn 65, you enroll in Medicare. And there's different parts to the Medicare programs. You have hospital coverage, doctor visits, prescription drug coverage. So you don't have to spend down your assets. There's no look back period. That's why it's called an entitlement program. You just become enrolled in Medicare. Medicaid is a means tested program. In other words, you have to meet or be below certain income and asset levels in order to qualify for Medicaid. And there are many different types of Medicaid. So when I'm saying Medicaid, I'm talking specifically about Medicaid long-term care benefits. There are community Medicaid programs. A lot of the government health insurance that came from Obamacare kind of falls under Medicaid umbrellas for health insurance purposes. There are autism waivers, traumatic brain injury waivers, all sorts of different Medicaid programs. But in my world, Medicaid, we're talking about Medicaid long-term care, which means you have to meet financial eligibility criteria in order to qualify. It's not automatic enrollment.
Right. So Medicare does not pay for people to stay in long-term care.
It does not. It only gives you that maximum benefit of 100 days for rehab, and you're not automatically guaranteed that 100 days. So the nursing home is constantly reevaluating and reassessing if you're meeting those benchmarks that Medicare will want to see in order to continue paying for your rehab services. Once your Medicare days end, then one of a couple things happens. Maybe you're rehabbed to the point that you can go back home. And so the nursing home or the rehab will work with you on discharge planning back to the community. Maybe you're not able to return home. So now the question is, are you staying in long-term care, and then will you be private pay, or will you be Medicaid pending? Are we going to be applying for Medicaid? So that's kind of the tandem game between Medicare and Medicaid in the long-term care setting, where one ends and then the other one picks up.
Okay. And are you comfortable sharing the number? What is the number that you have to be under to qualify for Medicaid in assets?
Sure. So there's two different rules. I'll try to keep it simple. There are different financial eligibility rules for an unmarried applicant versus a married applicant. So for somebody who's not married, their countable resources have to be spent down below $2,500. So countable resources excludes things like their principal residence, life insurance with no cash value. There are certain other exceptions that don't count as part of that $2,500 limit. But everything else, retirement, checking, savings, CDs, bonds, investments, all of those assets would have to be spent down below that limit. For a married applicant, there's a range that you have to spend down to, a minimum and maximum. And whatever your number is, your limit is, depends on how much money you had as a couple when the nursing home spouse went into the nursing home for more than 30 days. So there's kind of a snapshot date where they calculate the total assets on that date. And then the community spouse, the person at home, is allowed to keep 1/2 of what they had on the snapshot date up to a maximum of $128,000 and change in Maryland. And the minimum is $25,000, $26,000, right around there. So it's adjusted every year for inflation. Those numbers move. But basically anywhere from 128 on the high end, 25 on the low end. So as long as your 1/2 falls within that minimum and maximum, then that's your number. So I think that's where there's a lot of confusion, because if you try to Google these rules, you can spend a day researching financial eligibility criteria for an individual, and meanwhile you're married and you have an entirely different set of rules that applies.
Right. And does that vary state to state as well?
It does.
Right. So even more confusing.
Yes.
Right. So when we first looked into this for my husband's parents, we were thinking he was most worried that someone was going to come and take the house.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I learned with the other conference that I went to, that a house can be put in a trust to protect it. Is that something that you deal with? Can you explain that?
Yes. So the trust topic is touchy. I don't want to I really don't want to complicate it too much, because it just gets so dense and technical so quickly.
Okay.
You don't have to put your principal residence in a trust to protect it. Okay, I'm saying that on the simplest level. So if one spouse goes into the nursing home, the spouse at home is allowed to keep the house in their name. We don't have to put it into a trust. It can even stay jointly titled in the nursing home spouse's name and the community spouse's name, because it's a principal residence. So it doesn't count toward their asset limit. So we don't have to do any extra asset protection with it from the eligibility standpoint. There's different issues on the back end. When somebody dies, then you've got Medicaid liens and recoveries where they try to recoup the money that they've spent for the nursing home or the Medicaid recipient during their lifetime. So that's a different piece of the plan. But on the initial eligibility, we don't need to put a house in a trust. And in fact, in Maryland, if you take your principal residence and you put it into a revocable trust, which when most people think of a trust, that's what they're talking about, kind of your run-of-the-mill estate planning trust. Now you've taken an excluded asset and you've converted it to a countable asset just by putting it into a revocable trust. So that doesn't work in Maryland as a way to protect the house. There are plenty of other options for protecting the house, but using a revocable trust is not one of them.
Okay. Yeah, we ultimately didn't end up doing that. So I'm not sure how different the laws are in New Jersey, but yeah. I didn't even know it was an option, 2 years ago until we started investigating this. So
yeah.
So we're really glad that there's people like you who focus on this all the time, because that was all pretty complicated and you were watering it down for us. So
well, I try to, and I don't like to give people so much information that they forget everything we've talked about. I want my clients to feel educated. I want people that have questions about it just to feel educated. And then you start asking the right questions, but that kind of opens another can of worms and then opens another can of worms. Yeah. So I tell people it's just like a CPA. You don't need to know the tax code. You just need to know you can call your CPA if you have a tax question.
Right. So Deb wants you to know that Evie Vandermeer is also watching. So
hi, Evie.
Hi. And we're going to leave kind of all those technical questions or the technical topic. And if anybody has specific questions, maybe they can type them in. But let's jump topics to YES and your affiliation with YES and what is YES, and give us the rundown.
Yeah. I'm so excited about YES. And, I really have such a small role in this whole organization. This is the brainchild of Deb Hanna, who is just a phenomenal person. She's a connector. She just automatically meets somebody and makes 5 different connections of people that you have to know. And she's right on with all of them. That's how you and I met.
Yep.
So she just has this magic skill, and above and beyond having this magic skill, she also has an incredible passion for helping people affected by dementia. And she kind of organically started this women's group years ago at this point called PALS, and they would get together and support each other. And these were women whose husbands had dementia, and these women were caregivers and kind of navigating those issues as spouses and caregivers and everything that goes along with that. And Deb came in contact with a financial advisor in Carroll County whose company made it their mission to give seed money to help small nonprofits get off the ground. And this whole idea kind of turned into, well, maybe this can become a real thing, like not just for spouses or women whose husbands have dementia, but a lot of the women in that group had spouses who were diagnosed at an early age. And so by definition, young onset dementia, sometimes called early onset, is anything diagnosed prior to 65. It kind of comes with a whole different set of challenges for caregivers and family members. And so Deb saw the need, and she kind of got together this think tank of people that were in her corner and had different connections in the professional community, people like Jill Rosner, people like Evie, who she knew through PALS. She kind of pulled all of us together, and we started brainstorming, and we identified different populations of family members or caregivers that would have different needs, everywhere from spouses to adult children, that sandwich generation where they have young children of their own, but now they're also caregivers for their adult parents or their older parents. And then we have kind of the middle-aged children, younger children. So all of these people have different needs. And we're not there to provide care for the person with dementia. We want to provide education and really support for these different groups, these different populations. So it all started to take shape. We were all really excited. We got our paperwork filed. We were an official nonprofit organization, and we were gearing up for our first fundraising campaign. And then COVID happened. And so it just kind of brought everything to a screeching halt. But we had so much good information, and we had such kind of motivation and initiative behind this new idea that we were able to keep that steam going during COVID. And we've been having all of our board meetings virtually. And interestingly, one of the groups that has really taken off, even in light of COVID, has been the young adult group. And so our facilitators that handle that group are just phenomenal, and they have personal experience as caregivers and family members of people with young onset dementia. So that's our goal, is now that we're hopefully starting to turn the corner here with COVID, and we can really begin to develop and expand these programs. We want to have in-person programs, virtual opportunities, as many different ways as we can make information and support available. And hopefully not just in Maryland. We've had interest come in from people around the country that are looking for this type of support, which is really exciting because it's an unmet need. And so we are excited to be able to, provide something to those people that can really feel so lost while they're going through that journey.
Right. So the E is for education and the S is for support.
Yes. So the Y has a lot of words with it. That's young onset dementia,
yeah.
Education and support.
Right. Yeah. Well, the word apparently is getting out, because I found out about Deb from a client of mine who is not local. She's in Maryland, but not local, who's dealing with, brain health issues. And so the word is getting out. And I'm excited. I'm really, really excited for you guys as an organization to be able to stretch your arms and spread your wings and help people near and far.
Yeah, we're really excited too. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have some personal background with dementia that got you involved with Yes. You said you were willing and even interested in sharing that piece. So
yeah. I think this is a good opportunity to share this piece. Probably a lot of people on my news feed don't even fully know the whole background story. It wasn't something that I necessarily discussed publicly while it was going on. It's something, even, I think I mentioned this to you when we spoke on the phone, even to this day, it's kind of hard to turn back and face it and engage in it and even really talk about it in depth. But I was a caregiver for my mom. My mom had Lewy body dementia. She died in December of last year, December 6th of 2020, at the age of 66. She was diagnosed when she was 59. And for the first couple of years, we had a difficult time getting a diagnosis, which I think is also important to know about young onset dementia, especially when people are under 65. so many physicians, I think, still just don't realize that this is a disease that can affect people younger and younger. So, first it was just, depression and anxiety and kind of the general course of medication that would be prescribed for that. And I knew it was more, so I just kept, pushing along and trying to find other specialists and other doctors. And fortunately, it took about 3 years, but we did ultimately get a diagnosis of Lewy body dementia. Which is what Robin Williams had. So that's kind of its claim to fame, which is a good and bad thing, but at least it brought some recognition to the disease that people didn't have before. And it's very different. It's equally challenging, but very different than Alzheimer's. One of its distinguishing characteristics is that people with Lewy body have fluctuating levels of cognition. So in other words, one day can be great, almost to the point that you might not know anything was wrong, and the next day can be the complete opposite, which is so challenging to deal with, and that gets worse over time. So I knew when I read the definition, I knew before we had the clinical confirmation that this is what we were dealing with. So it's challenging, I moved my mom in with me. I'm actually sitting in what used to be her apartment. And this was the only unfinished room in our house. Actually, when I moved her in with me, my dad was also living with me. I wouldn't say that I was his caregiver as much as I was his care pusher. I'm the one that was pushing him through different issues. He did not have dementia, but just making sure he was staying on top of his doctor visits and tests and all of that. And so they were divorced. And so my dad lived upstairs and my mom lived right below him in the apartment downstairs that we built for her. So the dynamics were interesting. And then she moved in August 1st of 2017. So she was here for just over 3 full years. And for the first couple years, she was largely independent. It was mostly medication reminders and just trying to motivate her to get out. She was very self-conscious. She had a lot of the Parkinsonian symptoms that go along with Lewy body dementia. So her tremors got worse over time. She was embarrassed. So even people that would reach out to her and try to engage her socially, she just became more and more reclusive. And that was its own vicious cycle of depression. And so that was really hard. And we used to have conversations when she was more able to understand it about, she would say, well, how long can I stay here? Like, when am I going to have to go? And I would say very objectively, really the breaking point is, if you can no longer use the bathroom, then how do I schedule that? I can schedule everything else that I need to help you with. We can schedule if I need to help you with a shower, schedule when you need to eat your meals, schedule when you get dressed, when you take your medications. But something like that can't be scheduled. And so that will become a challenge on how do we manage that on, a 24/7 basis. And then it just kind of went downhill so quickly at the end. And from October 2020 through when she died, I really didn't work. It was just caregiving, managing, and whatever crisis would arise. Jill Rosner was on speed dial, helping me figure out all these things that I thought I knew professionally. It was like I was blindsided. I wasn't able to fit my plan into my mom's situation. It just didn't work that way. So, and then that's why I mentioned earlier that I have brothers, and, they were very helpful, and anything that they could do, they did. But she lived in my house. And so it definitely made it more of a day-to-day crisis, really, at the end. So I just felt alone. I didn't have a lot of resources. I had professional resources, which I was fortunate to have. So because I knew Deb and I knew Jill and I knew these people that worked in these fields, I was able to reach out to them and they got it. But my friends don't really get it. My closest friends would see what I was going through, but not a lot of people truly understood. And so it's hard to be going through that, feeling like there's nobody that really gets what you're going through. And finding support was difficult, even just an outlet, it was challenging. So that's part of what really fueled my excitement when Deb came up with this idea to create Yes. And I just knew that I would have loved to have somebody or have a group like the young adult group that I could get together with, have a glass of wine, just talk to these people, text these people that are going through the same thing. It would have been really helpful to me at that time. So now hopefully I can help develop these programs and get this off the ground so we can help other people in that same situation.
Right. I hear that more and more. Someone who has maybe some professional experience, but then they have a personal experience and it just drives it home. And you're like, how it was really hard for me to manage it. And I have like resources.
Yeah.
What about everybody else out there? This is what struck both my dad and I as we were going through the situation with my mom. I'm an occupational therapist. He was a clinical psychologist. My brother's a physical therapist. We had, 3 kids that were local that could help, and it was still really hard. What do you do if you don't have those kind of resources, financial or people that are nearby, or just the knowledge and skills? And so this kind of support group is so needed. And so do you have big goals and dreams about what Yes is going to be? Like, what do you see as far as programming or education? What's your hope?
Yeah. I think over the next year, and actually we just had a board meeting last week, and we have another one coming up where we plan to kind of circle back to some of those initial goals and try to really frame those in a way that we can make them happen now that we're nearing the end of this pandemic. Hopefully, we really want to get these other groups off the ground. So even though the young adult group has just really taken off running, we really want to have these other programs structured, have facilitators, start these groups and watch them grow. We want to figure out ways that this can be available to people throughout the country. Like I said, these are our big dreams. I think Deb even mentioned the other day, Deb, don't kill me for throwing this out there. She said, I wish we had like a house, like I wish we had a building where, we could host these programs. Like Yes would have a location where you could have all of these supports and services, and that would be just amazing to have that type of community resource.
Okay, so we need to talk. I've got ideas too.
Okay, good.
That's very exciting. So the first time that I talked with Deb, she was unfamiliar with the new science that shows that potentially Alzheimer's could be reversed and prevented. So hopefully that's part of the education that's planned. At every chance I have, I'm like promoting Dr. Dale Bredesen and his research. Because when my mom first got diagnosed, it was like, here's a drug you can take. It doesn't really work, but you can take it anyway. And exercise is good. And that was pretty much all they had. And now we have so much more information. It's a lot. It's a lot of lifestyle stuff. And some people will start and think, it's too much. I can't do it. And that's hard for the family to watch. But it can be really hopeful too, because there's things that I can do to help. And sometimes little things can make a huge difference, like adding in exercise or changing up the diet. But it's also, we know now that brain changes occur 20 years before symptoms. So it's important for when you're 30 and 40 and 50 to do what he refers to as a cognoscopy. Everybody knows about a colonoscopy when they're 50, but also do a cognoscopy, check your brain. So hopefully those can be some of the things that Yes kind of helps to share the information.
Absolutely.
So, if your mom or dad is in mid or late stage dementia, it's going to be really hard to make 20 different lifestyle changes. And it's harder to make dramatic changes that late in the game. But it can be really motivating for the kids because they see, wow, I don't want to go through that. Well, maybe there are things you can do to prevent it. So I find that that's really empowering.
It is. Absolutely. I think I mentioned to you that ultimately we did end up with a doctor who subscribed to a lot of that same philosophy. And I don't know if she was influenced by any of the literature that you're reading, but that was her passion. Yes, there are medications that we need to do and tests we need to run, but she would always circle back to nutrition and exercise and yoga and all of these other ways that you can change how your brain is working. And I was excited by it. I thought that's really something we can do. And here I was home trying to cook up, all this healthy food, and she just, wouldn't eat it. So then,
That's Rocco.
Oh,
That's Rocco.
Calories were better than no calories. So I didn't push it as hard as maybe I should have. But, I think it's a really exciting evolution in the science about dementia.
Yeah. So I'm gonna click back. Oh, hi, Mindy. So that's one of the speech and language pathologists that I've worked with in the dementia setting. Hi. Does anybody have any questions? If you want to, sorry, maybe I should let Rocco out. But if anybody has questions, go ahead and type them in. So
if anybody's typing questions, I also just wanted to mention one thing that you said earlier about NAILA, the National Academy of Elderly Attorneys. This is really your go-to resource. If you need to find an attorney in your state that knows all of these complicated Medicaid rules and what type of planning you need to do ahead of time, go to NAILA's website. So the acronym for National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys is NAELA.org. Right on the front page is a button that says find a lawyer, and you can search by zip code or city and state, and you can change your radius. So, every elder law attorney I know is a member of this organization. So you're going to find somebody that knows what they're doing. And like I said, it's not the type of thing that people really dabble in. So you want to find somebody that does this type of work. Most of the people will only do this type of work. And so that's a great place to start if you need to find an attorney to help you.
Okay. And one of the questions that I had to ask you that I forgot to ask is, when should you seek out the advice of an elder law attorney? Like, is there a magic day, time, situation where you're like, I need an elder law attorney now?
There's not a magic day. I would say, first of all, I would say elder law attorneys also make really great estate planning attorneys. So going back to these basic documents, I do a lot of basic estate planning work, and so that's a good time to develop a relationship with an elder law attorney. I tell my clients that come in, anytime there's a change in medical status, dramatic change in financial status, those would be good reasons to call me. Certainly if somebody's hospitalized, they're being discharged to rehab, that would be an event where if you can squeeze in a phone call with me, I want to be kept in the loop as they're moving through rehab so we can see where that's going to go. If you're beginning to hire caregivers, or you're just at the beginning stages of getting a diagnosis of dementia, for example, or you think that that's where your diagnosis journey is taking you, that's a good time to see an attorney. Just because somebody has been diagnosed with dementia does not mean that they automatically do not have capacity to execute legal documents. So you want to take advantage of that window, because once it's closed, it's usually closed for good. So you want to make sure your ducks are in a row. You preserve all of those opportunities for planning that you might need down the road. So that would certainly be a critical time to see an elder law attorney.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. So if somebody is in Maryland and in the Carroll County, Howard County area and wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
All of our contact information on our website. We have a Facebook page. You can message me or contact me through the Facebook page. Usually just calling the office. Anybody that answers the phone at our office is qualified to talk to you, gather important information, explain the process. And that's anywhere in Maryland, and above and beyond people that want to call me specifically, if they want to be a client, I want to be a resource. So if you call me and say, who do you know here, or who can I work with in this county, I can put you in touch with people. So it doesn't have to be that you're calling for me. If you just need me to help guide you, I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay, and remind us again the name of your business.
It's Hammond Law, but the
Hammond.
website is elderpractice.com.
Okay, elderpractice.com.
Yep.
And if someone, you said if they were anywhere else in the country, they can go to www.naela.org.
Yes.
And if they want to get in touch with Yes, what's the best way to do that?
Also through our Facebook page. We are very responsive and try to be very active on social media. We also have a website, yessupport.org. We have lots of information and ways to contact us through the website as well.
Okay, awesome. It doesn't look like any more questions popped up. So thank you so much for time tonight and all the information that you've shared and your passion and energy. We're grateful to have you on Yes, and in the community as an attorney, and now as a new connection. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.